We need to go back to 1960, that is roughly about 60 years ago, when in the United States and UK, because of the rapid industrialization, the air they were breathing was becoming increasingly poison, and the water there was becoming more and more poisonous. In such a situation, one environmental biologist by name Rachel Carson, Rachel Carson started writing articles to New York Times and other papers. And New York Times, as part of its social responsibility, started giving more and more coverage. And in fact, they went to the extent of almost printing a column every week. Encouraged by the response the society was giving her, she published a book known as The Silent Spring. This book, the Silent Spring, here the word spring it denotes life. That is, life should automatically be continuous, but unfortunately, we human beings, we are making it very extremely difficult for life to continue to sustain itself. And she projected scenarios where it will become extremely difficult, and ultimately the planet Earth may become lifeless. This particular book can be described as a book which launched environmentalism at the global level. It compelled people to take a second look at the kind of development they were pursuing in all the countries till then, particularly in America. And America, I request all of you to please focus the period between 1960 and 1970. It was a period where the Americans, the best in the Americans came out. Politically, they had John F. Kennedy, who was almost like a charisma, who stood for democracy, civil liberties, and he was for racial equality. And basically, he was relentlessly trying to integrate and internalize every American into the political system. Then we have Martin Luther King, who was working for human rights and trying to create a more level playing ground in the United States between the whites and blacks. A great human being and continuously working on peaceful lines on Gandhian technology. He unfortunately was eliminated. John F. Kennedy was killed. But then Ralph Nader, the consumer activist, is still alive today. But what a marvelous contribution Ralph Nader has. It's not just consumers. He was trying to protect the environment on environmentalism, on democracy, on consumers. He was taking the corporates in the United States by their horns and compelling them to abide by the law, compelling them to come out with products which will take the safety of the people into consideration. After this, one American senator, he took the lead and tried to sensitize the world. And because by then it was becoming increasingly knowledgeable that the planet Earth was going to face a large number of serious problems. And these problems, as identified by the universities then, were basically focusing on 5 major environmental issues. One, the depletion of the ozone layer. Second is global warming leading to climate change. Third is the loss of biodiversity. In other words, it is a story of vanishing species. Fourth is the expanding deserts. And the fifth one is the danger posed by nuclear reactors and nuclear bombs. But in addition to these, there was also a big debate on the kind of development that the nations in the world were thrusting on their respective people. Governments throughout the world, they call some activity as development and they thrust it on the people without consulting them, without involving them. And but the people, what the government promotes as development was appearing to be destruction. And that's why in many a nation, particularly in democratic countries, people started questioning the kind of development that governments were promoting at the promptings or initiatives of the corporates. At this particular stage, United Nations, that is where UN becomes very important. They took the lead and they organized a major conference. It is known as the first United Nations Conference on Human Environment, and this was organized in Stockholm. And for the first time, it enabled the nations of the world to come together and discuss threadbare the problems faced by the planet Earth. Secondly, and it was a tremendous exercise. And I can safely say that after the Stockholm conference, environment as a subject came to occupy the top position in the agendas of all the universities and all the governments of the world. The civil society, of course, was always in the forefront and they tried to keep it up. After Stockholm, it was a period of 10 years. We call it in the academics, in the universities, since we have done our PhDs on this particular subject, we have gone through the emerging literature at that particular stage, and the review of literature very clearly indicates that there has been tremendous progress, a spurt, something like a burst of a volcano on environmental knowledge. Suddenly, everybody started discussing this particular subject. Now, UN itself, United Nations, was worried. It was perplexed, worried because not because of it was afraid of the increasing knowledge, but then it was worried because the knowledge itself was multidimensional and it became extremely difficult for UN to keep a track of the emerging literature on the subject, and therefore they appointed a commission. And this commission is known as the World Commission on Environment and Development. It was headed by Mrs. Gro Harlem Brundtland, and this particular commission, which came into being in 1983, it worked for 4 years. They submitted the report 1987, and the United Nations then organized another global conference, and this was organized in 1992 Rio, and that particular conference came to be known as the Earth Summit. Now, the World Commission on Environment and Development, they made it extremely easy for the academic community to connect to this subject. They went through the emerging literature, review of literature, and finally they chapterized it. And as already pointed out, a chapter on ozone depletion, global warming leading to climate change, desertification, loss of biodiversity, and the nuclear threat. But in addition to this, the report also focuses on the need of the nation states. That is, the governments of all the states, they need to concentrate on the essential needs of the poorest of the poor. And on that, there cannot be any compromise. And the people of the world, the suffering people, are not going to wait eternally. So the UN cautioned the nations of the world and they gave them a prescription, an agenda. And this agenda, which was adopted in 1992, was known as Agenda 21. Now, friends, Agenda 21 is nothing but a package of practices, a package of the laws to be enacted and institutions to be created in all the countries of the world in order to address the the growing environmental concern at the global level. Now, a few countries responded favorably. Out of the 194, 95 countries, we have all kinds of governments. Some governments are based on religion, some on ideology, some are pure military dictatorships, and in quite a large number of countries, democracy is being suppressed. The will of the people is not allowed to be discussed. So, as a result, there has been a lot of imbalance when it comes to the responses of the states to this very important subject. Having said this, United Nations, when it came to year 2000, they thought that they need to give a very simple package for the nations of the world, and they gave what is known as the Millennium Development Goals, MDGs. And these MDGs are basically 8 in number, and the attempt is to focus on the essential needs of the poorest of the poor. And these 8 are the basic needs of the people. The first one is poverty. Second is, these are the problems. Overcoming these problems will become the goal. So, poverty, illiteracy, thirst, then child mortality, hunger, diseases, environmental degradation, and women uh, parity. We call it as equity, women issues. So, these 8 problems have got to be addressed on a war footing, and the time frame given to the nations of the world was only 15 years. That is from the year 2000 to 2015. It was expected that all the countries in the world will focus on addressing the problems of the poorest of the poor. Unfortunately, I'm not here to say that nothing has been done, but what is being done in most of the countries is something like doles, some kind of a pension, some kind of a small little subsistence allowance. And the activity, when it comes to going to the rescue of the poorest of the poor, has not been based on sustainability. As a result, in all the countries of the world, particularly, South Asia, Africa, Latin America, we find and we realize that unless the ecosystem is taken care of, the suffering of the people living in that particular ecosystem, it can never be addressed. For example, the people living in a forest ecosystem. See, at say about 50 years ago, 100 years ago, that particular forest may have been healthy. And also at that particular time, population in the forest was less, and people are living in a symbiotic relationship with their background ecosystem. They were living in harmony with the background ecosystem, and that particular ecosystem would take care of the nutritional needs of the poor, of the people there. But over a period of time, because of the greediness of the corporates, logging has taken place. They started felling the trees in a big way, and elsewhere in Brazil and other forests in Africa, and also in Australia, we have seen how forest fires have been destroying whole ecosystems, and that's a very serious issue. And it is a very serious issue, particularly for the biodiversity in the forest and for the human beings. The forest, the indigenous people, or in other words, the humanity that is there in the forest, and their habitats have been destroyed, and it is becoming very tough for the people to continue to live there. Now, even as the MDGs were expected to be implemented or addressed, that is, governments are in throughout the world, they should be addressing those 8 major problems, and they should be, enabling the people to overcome on those 8 fronts. But then the UN was, they played a visionary role, and they continuously started working. What action the nations of the world should follow after 2015? And that is where, they started working silently on another package, which will be more acceptable, more sustainable. And by 2010, once again, the world met in Johannesburg, and they discussed and adopted a resolution, a book, and that book is The Future We Want. That book is entitled The Future. The report is entitled The Future We Want, and it contains the seeds of Sustainable Development Goals. 2015, the goals were adopted. Almost all the countries signed, and it was a unanimous decision. And today, these goals are now under, I mean, humanity is in various stages of realizing those goals. In India, I'm not saying nothing has been done, but definitely as an environmental activist, I don't see much activity which can be described as sustainable. It's a very unfortunate thing. With a lot of pain in my heart, I need to mention that we in this country are not a witness to governmental initiatives which will go a long way in promoting sustainability. Now, there are a lot of examples. For example, I'll give you uh, CGR. We have been working on Eastern Ghats. As all of you are aware, friends, Eastern Ghats originate, and we can take it as a continuous, as a mountain range, which is located on the east coast of India, almost parallel to the coastline. But it is not, unlike the Western Ghats, it is not a continuous mountain range. There are gaps between, and we find Eastern Ghats in Orissa, in Andhra Pradesh, and partly in Telangana, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu. Maybe slightly it can extend into certain areas of Kerala because of the contiguity of the mountains. Now the question is, when we have an ecosystem which is spreading into nearly 5 or even more states, what is the mechanism that the government of India has created in order to protect the Eastern Ghats? On paper, right now, there is nothing. If you ask the Ministry of Environment, they are blissfully ignorant. In fact, they are not even conscious that they need to come up with an institutional framework to protect the Eastern Ghats. As a result, the task of protecting is left to the states, Orissa, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu. And what we notice is a completely disjointed, disconnected activity, and there is no what we call contiguity, nothing. As a result, you find the Eastern Ghats have been ravaged, destroyed the name of development. Huge dams have come up. Mining is going on like anything in Orissa, in Andhra Pradesh, and Tamil Nadu. And tomorrow, if this present rate of destruction continues, nothing will be left. And in fact, we have another problem in this country in the name of religion. Because just because there is some shrine atop a mountain, and we begin to lay Ghat roads and huge 100-kilometer roads. Take, for example, Sri Srisalam or Tirupati. I don't know. In the name of God, we are destroying the mountains. And well, that's a too sensitive issue, but then we should be bold enough to discuss. Similarly, when it comes to Himalayas, Himalayas are located, a lot of nation states are involved. China, Pakistan, even Bangladesh, though not directly geographically, but it will be affected if Himalayas are destroyed. Burma or Myanmar, Nepal, India, and how many rivers originate in the Himalayas? And what if they continue to be destroyed? There is no coordination between the nation states and within a country also, even in India, right from Jammu Kashmir to Assam or Meghalaya. What is the big coordination? The country has it doesn't have a single purpose vehicle in order to protect the Himalayas. Lastly, I do not wish to take, I would like to focus on what UN should be doing. United Nations in its present form is incapable of addressing global environmental concerns. It has done a great job in highlighting the issues. It brought the nations of the world together and told them to discuss. It did the homework and presented reports. Our common future, the future we want, Agenda 21, MDGs and SDGs. But in addition to this, I request everybody to please recall the conferences of parties, COPs on climate change, on biodiversity, and also, if when you take into consideration the innumerable agreements that are entered into multilateral environmental agreements between the nations, there are more than 600 such agreements existing. But where is the compliance? Who is going to monitor them? So, UN should be reformed, restructured, it should be empowered. And what I suggest is that we need to immediately create a global environmental code. It has to be there. We need to have, otherwise, already we have problems with Pakistan over sharing of water. Naturally, similarly, Bangladesh has a problem with river water. Not only, we have a problem with China when it comes to Brahmaputra. So not just a few countries here, but in every country. Look at the Nile, which starts flowing from the origins, Lake Victoria, and then ultimately goes to Egypt, traversing at least 7 to 8 countries. And what if the countries at the higher reaches, when they build a dam, it's always a big tussle. And even when it came to Aswan Dam, there was a big threat. So distribution of river waters is going to be a major issue. So will the UN create institutions in order to address these issues? Now look at the ocean and the plastic pollution. Absolutely, all the oceans in the world, it is said by 2040, that is another 19 years to go, there will be more plastic in the oceans than fish. That means we are destroying the ocean, we are destroying the North Pole, South Pole. All the global commons are being destroyed, and humanity is a mute witness. What is it that we have planned? If we love the next generation, if we, recognizing our responsibility towards them, we have to create institutions, we have to empower UN, and we the people living in different countries, our friend from Nurul Islam from Bangladesh and other friends from different countries, yes, we all should come together and we should learn to make a common cause. We have to wage common struggles for the common future of life on this planet Earth. Otherwise, David uttered, a statement, final statement, 95-year-old elderly gentleman who has been working relentlessly for the past 70 years. And in his final testament, he said that it is his, he has been a witness to the virtual destruction of what we call the common spaces, the open areas, which are meant to be for all. Fortunately, everything is lost. Let us all take a serious look. Occasions like World Environment Day, this day provides us an opportunity to reconnect, and we the people, we have common states. Already we are in the midst of pandemics. The foolishness of some people in some country is hurting the us and the lives of everybody in the world.